Actually, I have also some initiatives, I must say, or some communication presentation will be delivered by Ms. Niveen Abdurrahman, from the holding company. She's over there with us. Before, since we are talking about climate change, before I start the session, I'll give some background information, I must say, about the proactivity of Egypt to tackle climate change impacts. Egypt was proactive in achieving SDGs, actually, and Carol will focus on this very important topic. SDGs number 6 for clean water and sanitation for all. And we are proud to have Dr. Abdelawi Khalifa, the former Minister of Utility, that he was behind establishment of the holding company for water and wastewater at 2004. And I consider it as an initiative for clean water and sanitation for all that fit with the goal number 6 of SDGs. The goal number 6 of SDGs is one of the very important goals, from my point of view, because it links with other goals, like number 8 for job creation, number 16 for social justice, number 3 for health. That's why I considered Egypt has been taking a proactive activities and the initiatives to tackle the climate change. I also have to mention something very important, because based in SDGs, it has to be by year 2030. Have to achieve access for drinking water for all. In Egypt, we have already covered more than, I must say, 96% of clean water, drinking water for Egyptian, except the new settlement and the new activities in the settlement cities. Also, by the year 2030, we have to achieve adequate sanitation. This is very important and hygienic for all. In Egypt, we covered the sanitation by 57% from the population. And the rest is not just connected. All of the Egyptians are connected with the sewage system, somehow with septic tank and latrine, but they have, the toilets, they have everything. It's hygienic problems, has been tackled, all of this. The rest for the non-treated wastewater is going to be tackled by the year 2022, this as we planned for. For climate change action, also in the holding company, last week we initiated one of the very good program for national sludge to energy to minimize the greenhouse gases. One of the adaptation or initiative as well that linked to climate change, the project that went to my colleague, Dr. Mohammed bin Hassan, will going to talk about it, the anticipatory flood management to Alexandria city, that will be the pilot project for replication in other Egyptian cities all over the country. Wastewater reuse as well is one of the very important issue and one of the very important initiatives that has been taken to increase, the forestation, to minimize the greenhouse gas and to minimize CO2 emission as well. I don't want to take more, but to start with my colleague Carol. She is Carol. I think all of you know Carol. She's well known at ISQA. She's taking a lot of initiatives concerning the climate change and SDGs. Her work focuses on the implementing and regional initiatives and effort to support Arab states in the area of climate change assessment and adaptation. Also, she shared water resources management. She also involved intensively in water, energy, food security nexus, and the water, of course, related SDGs. Carol, she has multi degrees from School of Law and Diplomacy in Boston, and as well from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. So Carol will give, around 20 minutes presentation about the topic of regional initiatives for assessment of climate change impact. And at the end of the session, she has also initiatives planned for by ISQA, and we will take some recommendation and feedback from all of you. So please, Carol.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Sabah khair. This is going to be a bit of science early in the morning, and I'm very pleased to see actually all of you here. Taking off on what was just mentioned, we have been working on climate change issues for about a decade, and now with the SDGs, the focus of this was actually positioned under the Arab Ministerial Water Council because of the need to think about water-dependent sectors. And that's why I think looking at climate change in this conference for the Arab Water Week does provide us some insights as we think about agriculture and irrigation, etc. So let me start, if this is working. Sorry, don't explain to me. Upside down. Oh, I'm sorry. So, to save some time, we've been working on an initiative called the Regional Initiative for the Assessment of Climate Change Impacts on Water Resources and Socioeconomic Vulnerability across a variety of sectors. And we've been working on this since 2007. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you very much. Since 2007, because in fact at the Arab regional level, the first declaration that the Arab states collectively said on climate change was at the Arab Ministerial Water Council in 2007. After that, there was a series of resolutions that created a mandate to better understand climate dimensions for water sectors and other parts of the economy, both through ESCO's ministerial session, through the Economic and Social Council of the Arab League, Water Council, Met Services, agricultural boards of directors of LAS organizations, etc. And that's where the mandate, the intergovernmental mandate for this type of assessment comes into play. And so we have been looking exactly, using dynamic modeling and vulnerability assessment tools to better understand what climate change means for these sectors and informing, therefore, assessment, adaptation, even mitigation work, and of course, ESCWA support to Arab negotiators within the UNFCCC processes. We do not do this alone by far, however. We have 11 partners very engaged in this process through the first phase of RCAR, and actually right now we're about to launch a second phase, and we thank the Swedish government for their generous support to this, as well as the German government. So what have we been doing under RCAR? Well, it has a four-pronged approach that deals with creating a knowledge hub that allows Arab officials and researchers and those interested in the Arab region to have access to information, to conduct assessments and look at local level work of their own choosing. We are looking at integrated assessment, which is rather unique because it links impact assessment, which people traditionally know, and vulnerability assessment, which people traditionally know, but it puts it together into something to have a comprehensive way of examining water-dependent sectors in the region. We had a series of capacity building and institutional strengthening activities and awareness raising and information dissemination. Institutional capacity, for example, we have an Arab Climate Outlook Forum that is now established. The head of the Met Service of Egypt is quite active. But I'm going to really be focusing on the assessment component for this presentation. So what is this integrated assessment? It's taking dynamically a set of projections based on regional climate models that are nested in global climate models. is linking it actually to hydrological models. Okay, so that is also a different component than we traditionally see in IPCC reports. And then taking those outputs to link into a vulnerability assessment. And we're going to go through that methodology as much as can be done in 20 minutes and some of the findings. What was the first change in the way that we were operating is to establish an Arab MENA domain to conduct this work. Before, it was really taking snapshots of the region from global reports or having countries do their boundaries in a little bit larger. As you can see here, for example, the IPCC was dividing up the Arab region into about 5 parts before when they looked at climate modeling results. There was a little bit of an evolution later on that put some of the North African countries with the Mediterranean, but then we couldn't talk to Oman about all the extreme events hitting there in a collective way. So really, we wanted to have something that allowed Morocco to Oman, from Iraq down to Somalia to really talk with each other because this was mandated by an intergovernmental process. Okay, so they wanted something to allow them to speak collectively and understand issues collectively within the MENA, within the Arab domain. This has been vetted by the coordinated downscaling experiment under the WMO. They call it the MENA domain because we are under the League of Arab States umbrella for this project. We call it the Arab domain. In the end, it's internationally vetted according to this boundary that allows us to think about the headwaters of the Nile to the headwaters of the Tigris of Euphrates, the pressures coming off of the Indian Ocean that are affecting Oman with all those extreme events I'm sure you've heard, and Yemen on the southern part of the Gulf, as well as what's coming off of the ocean on the Moroccan side. So not only did we have a domain that was set up, and again I acknowledge our colleagues at the Swedish Met and Hydrological Institute who really helped us with the science of that and our collaboration with institutes in the KSA, et cetera, and in Syria with ACSED and ESCWA's team that worked on that. But then, because this was, again, done in 2010-11, when the AR reports, the last AR report was still under development, we chose 2 regional representative concentration pathways to think about. This high emission 8.5 scenario that you can see on the top, and you can see how the red line goes all the way higher when you think about, they say high emissions, it might be business as usual as the way we're going right now, but we think about an 8.5 high-end scenario and a 4.5 moderate range scenario in terms of what might happen in terms of atmospheric pressures by the end of the century. So you'll be hearing a lot of 8.5, 4.5 in my presentation, and these are IPCC vetted and Cordex vetted scenarios that were based for our scenario. And then we took the climate projections, nested it into hydrological models. We used HYPE and VIC, as well as some HEC HMS modeling tools for basin level analysis, and looked at extreme climate events to generate the output. So it's quite comprehensive. It's not looking at one snapshot. So if you're a modeler or if you are an official, you can find the level of this that is most interesting to you. That's the exposure side. So when you see a vulnerability assessment, the impact chain that we work on, we take exposure, which comes out of all that impact assessment work. We link it to the sensitivity of the ecosystem to that exposure to generate potential impacts. Then what the vulnerability assessment does is think about that adaptive capacity. Because if there's an impact in the UAE and an impact in Lebanon or in Jordan, your ability to maintain and react to that impact is very different. So it's not only the biophysical impact that's important to think about with vulnerability, but your ability to cope, your resilience, your adaptive capacity, the country's adaptive capacity. Those together come up with vulnerability. So an impact assessment map really only tells you half of the story. And the way that we chose through our consultative process is actually to weigh potential impact, so the biophysical pressures of what's happening in the climate, equally the human capacity to react. So we've balanced potential impact and adaptive capacity as a 50-50% ratio. Others might think differently. Other people might be very fatalistic and think, no, whatever we do, the environment is going to affect us, and you might want to weight that 75% and human capacity 20. But just so that you realize the way of thinking about climate change is really your philosophy on how people are able to respond and react to their conditions. And we had this as a balanced way when we were thinking about vulnerability. So we've developed a series of publications and outcomes on this. I'm going to give you some of the key findings now. Where am I on time? Oop, I forgot. I hope you're keeping time because I forgot to press my timer. And a series of case studies that have evolved based on the finding. So this is the Climate Change Assessment Report. We have a main report and a technical annex. The executive summary is there if some people would like, and it's available at ricard.org. As mentioned, there's an impact assessment side, and there's also a vulnerability assessment side that goes through all the sectors, and a 400-page annex where you can just cut and paste maps right now. Really, people have been using that already to inform their own research and papers already that is available if you don't want to do the modeling yourself. So what do we find? Okay, this is the photo that everyone likes seeing. So the idea for the Arab region, the world we're talking about a 1.5, we're trying to limit climate to not increase beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. That's what they are talking about globally, so that the global average temperature doesn't go beyond that. In this region, we're talking about 4 to 5 degrees Celsius increase by the end of the century. We are well beyond the 1.5 for discussion. We're no longer in that frame of mind if you're thinking about the impacts here. So whether it be, and the way to understand this, does this have a pointer, perchance, or no? This one? Thank you so much. This is the reference period. You can see it's a 20-year period here where you have the reference. So this is our 4.5, and this is 8.5 in terms of the high-end scenario, lower emission scenario. And how do you look at all these maps is you look at the baseline, the reference, and this is the additional temperature in comparison to this. Okay, so by the middle of the century, okay, this period here in the middle of the century, and this is end century, this is how much hotter it gets when you think about average temperature trends. So it's not an absolute, it's in comparison to the value given in the reference. So that's how you look at these outcomes. Okay, so we're talking mid-century. For the moderate end, you're getting a bit yellow, about 2 degrees more. And if you're very optimistic and thinking about a moderate case scenario, you're already thinking about 3. Behind my head, your higher emission. So it's, we're talking about an average, this is average, not extremes. So an average temperature annually, having about a moderate, in the 20s, let's say, on average. It gets hotter, and we're talking 4 to 5 degrees above 86 levels, not above pre-industrial levels, above 1986 to 2005 levels.